Welcome everyone back to the Family Ties podcast. My name is Julia Avery, and this is my sister and co-host, Kelly Ritchie.
Hi everybody, Kelly here. Glad to see you guys again.
So this week we have the pleasure of getting to speak with the mother of James Alex Hurley from last week's episode, and we'll be hearing everything from her perspective and, get a little bit more insight on the case and hopefully shed some more light on a much needed topic. Kelly?
Yes. Guys, we are really, really lucky to have Alicia Davis with us here today. Thank you, Alicia.
No problem.
I know this has been a very difficult year for you, especially, and we would like to just start off by saying our condolences for your loss. We can't even imagine or fathom what this has been like for you. And so we would like to just say you've been in our thoughts, at least, since we heard about this case.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you don't mind, what we would really like to do is have you, from your own perspective, kind of tell us how this came about and, your own timeline, how, so like when you met Alex's dad, what that relationship, led up to you sending Alex off to be with his dad, and how everything happened from that point from your perspective. And we'd like to kind of interject occasionally, but we'd really like this to be from your viewpoint.
Me and his dad were friends. I mean, we'd been friends working at my aunt's house together, and we were off and on for about a year, and then our friendship kind of faded, and he moved off and moved up to Montana. And I decided, whenever I'd found out that he had been through some surgeries after his car wreck up in Montana, that Alex needed to go get to know his dad. So I sent him up there to get to know his dad. Little did I know his dad was going to pass 8 months later, and I would have a nice 2-year-long custody battle against his mother.
Wow. With that being said, like, with your relationship with his dad, how much did you know about his family just off the bat? Was it little bit? Did you know them personally?
I did not his mother's side that much. I knew more of his dad's and the kids from his dad, and they are all fabulous people. I love each and every one of them. We're still in close contact.
Wow.
How did there become a custody battle between you and his mom? If you had sent him over there to be with his dad, how did that switch over to his mom?
Well, I had decided to let him stay up there and finish the school year because it was halfway through the school year when his dad passed in January of 2018. So I decided to let him finish the school year. And by the time the end of the school year came, it was, oh, we got all these plans for the summer, let him stay. So I was like, all right, I'll give him a summer with y'all. You're his grandmother. I assumed she was doing what grandmothers do best, spoil the kids.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother was cooking milk, pie. Are you hungry? Do you need a toy? I never suspected. There was never a red flag, nothing to indicate that it was what it was. I thought I was dealing with a mother who, all she had left of her son was his son, which looked just like him. Alex
Right.
looked just like his daddy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what I thought I was dealing with, because I know how I would be had, the shoe been on the other foot and it was my son that I had lost like that. And I had his son. I would want to raise my grandson.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that specifically in mind, Julia and I were talking about that. We kept, during the recording of the episode, referring to her as Patricia, but then we kept being like, no, we're going to call her grandma because that's what she is here. And how on earth can
I just think disassociated such a close contact and was able to just totally disassociate from those emotions. And it was like, no, we need to speak about it like she is the grandma, because that makes this that much worse. It's bad enough if it's anyone in particular, But when you're dealing with a grandmother and a grandson, it's like that emotional disconnection is just absolutely mind-boggling.
Yes.
Did you get to
I've been
talk to
seeing a
him
lot of cases.
frequently?
I was in the beginning, but the contact became more little and more little and more little. And I was okay with it because I was calling the local police department and having well checks done.
Oh.
All the well checks were coming back that everything was fine.
Mm. So that
Hmm.
actually goes into one of the questions that I had, Alicia. So in regards to her, Julie and I are trying to kind of iron out in our heads, like, do you believe that this was stuff that she did to even her own kids before Alex got into the mix here? Or do you think this was all just directed to Alex?
No, she's physically abusive to any child that's not come from her, excuse my language, but her vagina. You know, she has two step kids that were James Sasser, the junior dude, the grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
There was two of his kids that were living under her roof, and both of them have given allegations that she was physically abusive to them. I had no clue on this. Had
Mm-hmm.
I had any knowledge of that, I'd have been on the next flight up there and I'd have brought my son home.
Do
Right.
you know
Absolutely.
if they were also removed from school?
That part I can't talk about. I do know more about it, but I cannot discuss it.
Okay.
Gotcha. Now it's so in that decision to let him be with his dad so he could get to know his dad. Did you ever have like this thought or this feeling that, his dad's passing, like, did you talk to Alex and see exactly how that hit him, or, how that affected him seeing that?
He voiced his opinion to me, and he told me, he said, "Mom, I'd really like to stay a little bit longer. I have memories with my dad. I'm not ready to leave him yet." And I understand.
Mm-hmm.
I totally understood. He didn't have his dad for so long, and now he finally had his dad, and then his dad was taken from him again. So, I was okay, I understand.
Yeah.
I I let him stay up there with her because I was under the impression from everything I was getting back, talking to the school, talking to the police department up there, that he was in good hands. He was being taken care of by her. I don't think the abuse started until after she took him out of homeschool. Took him out for homeschooling in September of last year.
So that's kind of what I was wondering, is in my mind, I feel like just from our experience as kids in a home with a very mentally ill mother, who, like, the abuse was always there, but it compounded and got worse when we were yanked away from, anywhere that was public. So we got yanked from all activities, we moved to the country, and so everything just kind of progressively got worse from there, as soon as they were able to do it under the cover of not having to be in the public eye. So maybe it had just gotten to a point where they couldn't answer
Right. And they
for.
couldn't hide it anymore. Like that's often the cases that we've been looking through, which is what's given us this passion to really openly discuss these cases, is because of how often the abuse is there for a long time, and either CPS has failed to do the proper like wellness checks like that you were asking for. It seems like there's some failure on the system's part when that's made available to them, and then when they get pulled from school, then it's like they become hidden, and then the abuser gets more power and they feel more open and free to do what they've been doing this whole time, but just on a more intense and more compounded, like Kelly was like saying, it becomes more compounded and worse.
Yes. I I know that a lot of the family has talking to me, and they have told me that even when they were calling to check on Alex, there were no red flags.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
So, we were all under this disguise that she was grieving, a grieving mother, and all she had left of her son was her lookalike grandson.
Mhm.
And Alex did. He was spitting image of his father. I mean, to the dimples in his smile, he was exactly like his dad.
Wow. I think so. That is really an interesting thought, because I think you could be right there. Yeah, I just always wonder what that catalyst was for her to think that, okay, I'm going to pull him from school now to where I can just do whatever and not have to answer to anyone. But with those, did all those welfare checks happen before that point?
Yes.
Okay,
I
so
had
that could
I
be.
had backed off of them the summer of 2019 because everything was coming back that it was all good.
Mhm.
You know,
Mm.
Yeah.
school, he was an active child in school. So I had backed off. I was like, okay, she's just pushing me away because she's scared that I'm going to rip him away from her.
Mhm. Right.
And I never had plans on that. If you want to raise your grandson, I understand it, but it should have been done properly.
Right.
And
And
like
you
she
have to
wants to
still
say,
be in
oh,
his life. You still have
yeah,
to have a part.
I was hoping that we were working up to the point because I was actually getting ready before I had gotten the awful phone call on February 3rd. I was getting ready to fly up there to legally take him away and tell her, you can't mind the rules, you don't get him.
Mhm.
Right.
Right.
Has to have contact with his family down here in the South. He was raised down here. He has a huge family. His memorial service, the church was so packed, it was standing room only.
Oh my. Wow. I I can't even imagine what it would be like to get that call.
Mm-mm.
Um
No.
Especially with, you not really having any kind of the red flags, like you're saying. You
It's kind
did
of
everything on
blindsided.
your part to make sure that everything was okay. And one thing that we do see often is how CPS or these investigations are not thorough. There is so much that falls through the cracks, but this doesn't seem like this is a case where they were the ones at fault, where they typically end up being one of the two major key things for the victims that we're
Well,
finding.
had the neighbors been proper human beings and made a few phone calls themselves
Yep.
when they saw it,
Yep.
Yes.
then we probably wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation.
Yeah, that's something
I
else that
know
we
I know
were
down here
baffled by.
I know down here in Texas, I don't know how it is everywhere else. Every state is different in their culture, but here in Texas, that's something that would have been. I mean, it would have been a cop call
Yeah.
immediately. The cops would have been called on that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I would like to know what kind of neighbors had to disregard making a phone call for that.
Yeah, we were wondering, we were trying to find out if they had ever made a note, like a call, and if that was where like maybe CPS had fallen through the cracks. But it doesn't seem like, with your statement that that was ever the case. And then it just how it just makes you wonder, like, how as a human being do you see something like that happening to a child and go, "Hmm,
And
they're
guys,
just
what
taking
Julia's
care of."
referring to is the incident that they later reported, like, oh yeah. So yeah, we did see them chasing him as he's trying to run away and hold him down, and they're dragging him back inside, beating him. How on earth do you as a human being think that that is not worthy of you stepping in some capacity, whether it be to make a call or to go and knock on that door,
And
you
then
know?
forgetting it until somebody brings it out and you're like, "Oh, yeah." Like, I feel like they are
Yeah,
equally as guilty. Like, I really
I would
hope that
like
these
I would
neighbors are
like to
getting
know
some
how they.
time.
I can't talk about that. I can't discuss that, but I can say that I'd like to know how they sleep at night
Yeah, absolutely.
because I wouldn't be able to sleep peacefully knowing that I could have stopped a child's death. I
Absolutely.
would not be able to sleep.
Neither would
Well,
I.
Alicia, what's stunning to us is that, okay, so we had begun this just mainly wanting our podcast, wanting to talk about just homeschooling and like the pros and cons. But then we started to like really read into these stories. And a lot of kids that we grew up with were in lots of different terrible, messed up situations. But what we're realizing is that there's just no laws out there protecting kids whatsoever. But there's tons of laws out there that protect not just parents, but the adults in the room. And that's been shocking, because in these cases that Julia and I cover now, it's like in every single one of them, somebody just turned a blind eye. Like there were people around them that saw something but didn't say something. And we're finding out that in homeschool communities specifically, which they weren't necessarily a part of, the Sassers, but in these communities, there's this belief that, the parents have the right, or the guardians have the right to make whatever decisions they want. And that's their business. It's not yours. But that doesn't fly to me when a child is involved.
I feel that. Yeah, no, it shouldn't. No, I just hope and pray that and that's why I'm doing this, is because I want more coverage on Alex's story. I want it out there because maybe it will trigger somebody else to say, hey, I need to make a phone call about what I saw and save somebody else's life.
Yeah.
Bring some new laws to protect children better. Something has got to give to where there's more protection for children, especially homeschooled children. Nobody checks on these kids. They go
No.
weeks without anybody checking on them. They could be dead and nobody's going to know it for weeks.
Right.
There should be a law to where the parents have to bring the kids into the school once a month or something, to where there's other people laying eyes on children in the homeschool.
Exactly.
And one thing that we found is super interesting is that the reaction to certain laws being brought about. So from your perspective as a parent, let's just pretend that with your children that let's say you want to homeschool, and you report to the state that you're going to homeschool them. In most states, like the one we grew up in, you only have to do that. You don't have to send in test records. You don't have to answer to anybody. No one checks in. So you don't even have to prove that you're teaching these kids. So we taught ourselves for most of our lives, and that was so difficult. But one thing that we saw in Hawaii, they brought about legislation that they wanted to pass that said, okay, so if you're a sex offender or a parent who's under CPS investigation
Or if you've
currently,
ever had like a domestic abuse violation on your record,
you can't homeschool, or it'll be tougher for you. How does that seem fair to you? Because it seems fair to me.
Mhm.
I find it very fair. I mean, and I can't lie. I do have a criminal history of myself. We were all young and dumb at one time,
Mhm.
but I've straightened up since I've had Austin, my oldest one. I don't do nothing stupid. And through this pandemic, I have had to homeschool him. And yes, it got on my nerves having to deal with it, but I did not beat on him or tie him up.
Right.
I just
Exactly.
walked away and took a break for myself.
Right. And it's not even covering like when you're young and make, go against the law in some form or fashion. They're talking about like specific violent offenses.
Yeah, I
Like,
don't think
that what I
pedophiles
mean?
have
Like,
no rights.
you'd think that if you are afraid, if you are against that, to me, that raises a red flag, as if you are violent and you are afraid of not being able to do this because you have nefarious plans. That's what that says to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that law should be passed statewide, not just in one state. It should be coast to coast. The
Yeah.
entire
Yeah.
America should pass that law to where if you're under investigation for CPS, or you have been under investigation for serious CPS allegations, or you have a violent criminal past
Right.
or a pedophile, you should not be no, they should not allow you to homeschool your child. I mean, what's going to happen? They're going to go to public school and get picked on. That's what makes us tougher.
Mhm.
The public school is what makes a child tougher as an adult, is putting up with your peers, learning how to deal with other people, learning how to fix a problem without a fight.
Yeah.
That
It's
is what public
critical
school
life
is for.
lessons. Yeah.
Now,
Yes, that's why these kids need to be in school.
speaking of school, it seemed like Alex, he had ADHD. Is that correct?
Yes, he did. But that, I don't know what, he was A's and B's with me. His entire, I mean, pre-K, kindergarten, all the way up, he has had straight A's. I mean, a B here and there, but he's always just very much loved the school life.
And my
How
boyfriend
would
has
I mean, he
ADHD and grew up with it. And, he made it through school just fine. But the thing is that, it wasn't something that, of course he had a lot of extra energy. But it didn't make him a violent
no.
or an individual who needed to be yanked out because they weren't handling it. Apparently, from what we read, he was even improving before she had yanked him from school. So
yeah.
he seemed to be doing fine in school around other people.
When I had him, he had, I mean, it sounds harsh. He had chores from the time he got home from school until it was time to go to bed. But with having ADHD, you have to keep them busy.
Exactly.
So,
Right.
I was, oh, Alex, I need your help doing this. Alex, I need your help doing this. Can you do this while I do this? I would purposely find stuff for him to do to keep him busy, because if you did not keep him busy and he got bored, just like with most children, they get
Right.
into trouble. And
Yeah,
kids
that's
It's
do
just
just
that.
being a
kids.
kid.
That's what they're supposed to do.
Mhm.
Yeah. The world is new to them, so everything is new. We've been in this place a while, but like kids are experiencing things for themselves. They're living more in the moment than we do, and
Just very
they're not thinking.
curious. They're just super curious about everything. I love that.
And I just think I want to keep reiterating the fact that he was young. He was a child. And
Yeah.
even if he didn't have ADHD, he would probably be a hyper. My brother was super, super hyper. I mean, my mom had to keep him really busy. But, he was just being a boy. He was being a boy. And, you know, that didn't make him worse or than any of us because he had all that extra energy or was a little naughty. I mean, to me, that's just part of childhood.
Yeah.
It's our jobs as parents to know how to discipline our children and when to discipline our children. And like my grandmother once told me before she passed, not every battle has to be won to win the war.
Oh,
Oh,
I
that's a
like that.
really good one.
Especially with kids, because you're not going to win every single battle.
No, and that
You're
shouldn't be
not,
your
you have,
goal, like I mean, really it's the end game. What do you want from your child? Do you want them to, be able to think for themselves? You want them to be humble, to be kind, and sometimes that means, not always doing mental struggles with them all the time, just trying to prove that you're right. Because then they're going to do the
no,
same
see,
thing with everybody else.
when Alex started irritating me, I would send him out to the garage with the guys to work on something. Go fix a motor, go fix a motorcycle, go make a truck run. That boy loved mechanics, and his dream was to be a master diesel mechanic.
Oh,
Man. And that's so interesting because I think a lot of kids who do have ADHD, kind of like my boyfriend, they have such a scientific mind. They want to know how it works. They
yeah.
want to like get to the
Mhm.
nuts and bolts of things. And that's stuff that should be encouraged. And for the fact that he kind of knew that so early on, I think that's great. And
Yeah.
I just from what
I
I've seen of him, he just seems sweet.
My mom always, even I can remember, even in middle school, even younger than middle school, I always remember my mom, what are you going to be when you're growing up? When you're grown, you need to know what you're going to do. You can't just play your whole life. You have to start working on college. You have to work on this. You have to do this. And I did that with my kids. And I still do that with my almost 15-year-old. I mean, it's you know, is that grade going to be good enough for you to make it? Do you know this to know that? What makes this work? How does this work? And I've always told my kids, do your research.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Always do your research. Research can be fun. Alex, I mean, both of my boys, they love documentaries, the how to's, the big machine shows on how it's made.
Yeah.
I mean, they
That's
were
awesome.
always, we didn't watch meaningless cartoons. We always, I had documentaries go in, or how it's made, or something that would keep them interested in learning more.
That's
Right.
awesome.
Right.
And
Well,
that's what
and
you've got to do, because when you grow up, hindsight's 2020, and you're always like, well, I wish there was somebody that could have told me this. So you've got to be that person for your kids. And it sounds like exactly what you're doing.
that's our job as a parent. Any parent is to push your child to be better than you were.
Yeah.
I like
And
that.
that's not just your own child. You should be pushing all children. I push my nieces and my nephews, my great nieces, my great nephews. I'm constantly pushing them to achieve better.
Yeah.
Right. And that's important. So, what I would really kind of love to ask is so if you could tell us a little bit about the phone call you got, because we would like to ask if whatever you can tell us about the court proceedings and what you've actually been a part of. I know it's happening, all the court proceedings are happening in Montana, correct? So that's a little difficult for you
Yes.
to like make
The
it physically for
only
each one.
Yes, each trial's individual. The only trial that we have been done that we are now done with is James Sasser the third. 15-year-old gave the fatal blow.
Right.
Um, I I'm still trying to figure out how I feel about this. I mean, when I think about he may have gave her the fatal blow, but he was not raised right. He was not taught right.
He
So
was
how
also
can I be mad at him
encouraged.
when he was not taught right? Yeah, he was very much encouraged by his mother.
Yeah, we
I
I
just
think Kelly and I agree that she is where the origin of where all the problem starts. Um
yes.
but but he was old enough to, you know,
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out how I feel about it. I mean, as far as the grandmother and her husband, which is the step grandfather, yes, but I don't call him Alex's grandfather. Alex's grandfather on his dad's side is still alive and I mean, he's alive and he's doing good. And had he had the opportunity to have his grandson, he would have loved it.
yeah.
And he would not have ended it badly like this. But I don't know how I feel. I just know that it is the fault of Patricia Batts.
Yeah.
She is the sole reason my child is no longer with me, and that is where I try to keep my focus. Is that it's her. She's the problem. She was the bad apple, and
Instigator, culprit. Absolutely.
yes.
Well,
So
I
I
mean,
just
from my very uneducated position on this, my view is that yes, she's at the root of this, but let's also, I mean, I don't ever like to see, because I've seen it happen before, and Julie and I've talked about it, how we don't like it when teens or young adults get tried as adults. So I'm in no fashion thinking that he should be tried outside of his age group for this, but we also have to look at, okay, so coming from being very physically and emotionally abused, there's a point at which, let's just use race as a little quick little thing. Both of my parents were very racist, and I had a black neighbor, and as a kid I'd said that I wanted to marry him, and she told me I couldn't because he's black, and said all the, and my instinct, I'd been raised like to believe all this white supremacy stuff, but there was part of me that was like, I just asked her, I was like, why? It didn't
Like,
make
it
any
doesn't make
sense to me.
sense just
So
because
even
you're
as a
telling me.
child, you can kind of sense the right and wrong there. And when it comes to being violent, you know, even what I saw from my mom, all it did was instill fear in me and wanting to just live quietly. Like my whole goal was just to escape unscathed. And
Mhm.
we teens know right and wrong. So there is a level at which there's choice on his part. And I feel like I also, from reading this court document stuff, that there was some premeditation involved on his part.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that's
I
true?
I don't I don't know if I would call it premeditation or if he was just being curious. I have a 15-year-old, well, almost 15-year-old, and I'll go through his phone every so often and check his search history just to make sure that he's being good, which he is. But I see weird searches on, like, one was about birds. How many different bird species are there? Are the females uglier than the males? Just random stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And my kids yelling at me from the other room right now about it. But
They're like,
it's
don't embarrass me, mom.
Yeah, but I don't know if he was just wondering what would happen if I did this, what would happen if I did that, or if it was actual premeditated and he legitimately meant to cause that much harm to Alex.
Well, to
I can't
me,
say. I mean, nobody can say that but him. And I just hope that one day he will open up and talk and tell the truth and let everybody into that house.
yeah,
Yeah.
You know, what
those
was wrong
searches
in that.
indicate
None of us know.
fantasies, at least to me, and that's concerning. You
Well, the
know,
only thing that speaks
Yeah,
of premeditation to me though is him texting his dad and saying, I might just kill him today. It's like, I don't know, and that happening
that
so close to it.
I think at that point, that's where I hold the adult male in charge, and that's where I feel that he was not being what he should have been. He was not being a proper male or a proper adult, and he did nothing but stand by and let it happen. He could have got us all.
yeah,
He could have saved so many kids from her abuse.
yeah. The
Yeah.
the step granddad, he seemed just from, and this is just from us reading excerpts and articles on the case. I don't actually know everybody, so these are only assumptions, but it just seems like he was very passive. And part of me even wonders if Patricia may have been abusive to him as well, like a domestic abuse situation, to make him just let stuff happen, and thankful it wasn't happening to him. Or
I don't, none of us, all we can do is keep guessing and doing the what ifs until they tell the truth and they open up and they let the world in. None of us are actually going to know the truth.
Right.
that's true.
You know,
Um,
and for the children in the house that have survived, again, there's 3 of them, but one of them I have full faith in full recovery, and he's going to turn out to be an awesome man one day. As the
good.
little man who I'm going to leave unknown. But as for the other 2, the teenagers that were in that house, I can only hope that they learn from the wrong and they change and break the cycle.
Yeah, that's really tough to do. That's really tough to do.
And I mean, the key to that is going to be some really deep mental health, not just evaluation, but work on their part. And I really hope that, at least that's the minimum of what they have to do, is keep that up for the rest of their life. Because, Julie and I don't have any of those violent tendencies, but we have a lot of damage, a lot of damage. And mental health is just, because our mom didn't value mental health, and, it's ruined her life and her children's lives. It is something that is, such a key to this.
That is something that I've been preaching about since I gave birth 15 years ago, because my oldest was born and we knew right away he was autistic. Right away, I could tell he was autistic, and I automatically, mental health has, I mean, a lot of people don't realize mental health has a lot to do with how people function every day. You know, and if you
Absolutely.
don't take care of your mental health as a human yourself, and you don't take care of your mental health, you're harming others, not just yourself, but everybody around you, you're hurting.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, your brain controls every function in your body. It controls everything, and it gets overlooked the most.
Yes, it
Yeah.
does. I think they should bring in more laws for mental health as well, because I mean, like cops going after these other people that don't realize that they're mentally unstable until it's too late.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
Right.
and then just from our perspective, like Julie and I don't, like, I live paycheck to paycheck as it is. And we talk about this all the time with each other, like mental health. I'm like, I can't even afford to invest in my mental health because I'm just worried about making bills happen, making that happen. And it's like the thing that should be most important to address is something that most Americans can't even afford
It's so
to
expensive,
and
like, to get
it,
proper care.
yeah.
I think pharmaceuticals should change up how they do business. They shouldn't jack up the medications that need to be cheaper. I mean, it's like insulin. I mean, a diabetic has to pay an arm and a leg to get insulin, but a recovering heroin addict gets their drug of choice for free.
That's crazy.
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
that's a good point. That's insane.
I mean, there's so many laws that need to be dealt with, and so many more laws that need to be put into effect, and nobody's thinking about it. Everybody's quick to blame somebody else when, if you think about it, it was the entire system that failed that person. I don't think it's just one cop's fault
Amen.
for not checking in on my son, or one neighbor's fault for not making a phone call. I think it's the system that failed my son.
Yeah, I agree. And so, with that being said, could you walk us through whatever you can of the, like, getting that phone call, and then what steps you took from there going forward, and with the court cases, and how have you been able to just like join via like a Zoom call to like watch the proceedings, or?
Right now, I'm just Zoom calling into the court hearings and the court meetings and everything. But I do have every bit of plans of being there for Miss Patricia's in
Good.
person. I have every bit of planning to go up there and be sitting in that courtroom, so she has to look at my face.
Yes. Yes.
Has been being a part of watching these trials helped you feel any sense of justice at all, or feel
No,
more empowered, or has it been more discouraging, or how has this impacted you?
sitting through watching the 15-year-old trial. We're coming up on Gage Rouse's trial, and then I'm not for sure who's next on that one, but it it's pushing me more to want to be an activist for children, period, because it's just so many things that children need that's overlooked. And
Yeah.
it just makes me want to scream to everybody that they need to pay more attention to the children around them.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you're trying to be a friendly neighbor and keep out of their business, but sometimes putting your nose in somebody else's business can save a life.
Absolutely.
Well, my best friend, since we were both like 2 years old, we had a conversation recently. She's still in Kentucky. That's where both of us are from, me and Julia. Um, is She was talking about listening to this episode of the podcast where we were kind of saying, if you see something, you kind of have to say something. And she said that she'd been kind of ignoring something that's happening on her street. There's like a little kid that's repeatedly coming over, kind of asking for food, asking for things. And, she just was trying to mind her own business, but she kind of asked, for the mom's number, and been like, your kid's coming over here a lot, I don't mind it. She can come over and play with my kids. But she's kind of, after doing digging, just kind of seeing that this person is not necessarily feeding the kids well, not necessarily giving them clean clothes. So it's made her have to like face, instead of just kind of ignoring it, she's like, I think I may need to make a call to CPS. And I'm like, and that is fine.
And
You know,
it's
what I tell everybody when it comes to that, and I hope many, many people see this and understand and realize it, you can always make an anonymous phone call.
Yeah.
that's
And that
right.
phone call isn't
Always.
going to ruin the life. The
If you
that
are
phone call.
scared that if they're scared that their name is going to get said, or there's going to be a neighbor dispute because somebody called the cops or called CPS, you can always ask to remain anonymous, and by law they have to leave you anonymous. They cannot open up and say who made the phone call.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm
Stubs
thinking,
the phone calls. CPS cannot tell them who made the call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, that's a law. So, I mean, don't ever be scared to make a call. If you see something and it does not hit you right, please make a phone call. You could be saving the life of a child. You may never know, there may be 2 or 3 tied up in the house that can't get out.
Mm-hmm.
right.
And
And so
in
what
one,
if you're
make a
wrong?
phone
So
call.
what if nothing's going on? Then even better, But what on the off chance that something is, and you follow your gut and you call, and like you said, save a life.
Yes,
Another
save a
thing
life.
that
But back to, go ahead.
no, go ahead. I think it lagged just a little bit, and I interrupted you. I'm so sorry.
I was just gonna say back to when I got the phone call on February 3rd, because y'all have asked like 3 times on that one.
Oh.
Um, I didn't believe them. I didn't. I told them they have to call me back because I was at work. I was like, let me get home, call me back. The coroner called me back and talked to me, and I was still in utter shock. And everything inside of me was praying that it was a car accident or him outside and he got hurt. And I was just hoping it wasn't abuse.
Yeah.
Because that's always been my fear, is one of my kids being abused.
Mhm. Yeah. And no parent should have to outlive their children is something that I feel really strongly about. It's just it just seems so unnatural. And when you feel helpless, like, there's nothing that you could have done differently. It's just,
You
I can't
checked all
even
those
fathom.
boxes, and you're even sacrificing time away from him to try to give him more time with family that had been out of his life for a while, trying to give him that. And that says a lot because I mean, our mom tried to keep us away from our dad's side of the family, try to keep us away from that influence. And, you know, growing up now, it's really hard to have the same bond with our cousins and our grandparents that all of our other cousins do with each other because we missed out on like a huge chunk of time. And so the fact that you were able to think outside of yourself and be like, "You know what? He needs time with his dad. That accident made us think that life's short, you know? Let's give him that time with his dad. He's had time with me." And you were being selfless in the sense that you were like, "You need to have that time with your father." And you let him spend that time with that family. That's just it shows a lot about
A lot of
you.
character.
Yeah. I mean, it was
Grow,
very
growing
selfless.
up, growing up, I didn't get to know my dad. I knew my dad. I know who my real dad is. I had plenty of time with him, but as far as his family, I don't know my cousins. I don't know my aunts, and I didn't want it to be like that with my kids.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did not want them to say I didn't get time with my dad's side of the family. I didn't want to be that kind of person. I wanted to be able to say, I gave you that family a chance. They just didn't try.
Right.
Yeah. So along the lines of you, wanting to be this kind of being a catalyst for you wanting to be an activist for children, Julie and I are in the same boat, but we don't have a personal loss, that's driving that. What would you like to see come from this? Because one of the cases that we covered a few weeks back about Rayleigh Jolyn Browning, her her mom is trying to put into place Rayleigh's law, and the pushback that we're seeing from these deep-rooted homeschool groups that think it's just taking away their rights as humans to decide what their children learn. It's like it's kind of depressing to see the pushback when it doesn't seem like it should be.
Yeah.
I look at it's kind of like the way I feel about it when it comes to homeschooling a child. It you can't tell it. I mean, you can't really. It's not right to take that right away from a child. You know, you can't teach every child the exact same. You can't raise every child the exact same. Every child is different. And you have to be able to let them figure out that, some of them may need homeschool because that's the way they learn best.
Mhm.
But if they're not learning best that way, then, public school's not bad.
Basically, what you're
It's not a
saying,
bad
which
place to
makes
be, I
sense to
promise.
us, is do homeschooling if it benefits the child, not you, right? That's what we talk about all the time.
Exactly.
It's like the purpose of homeschooling shouldn't be what fits your agenda. It should be what is best for this child. And
Yes, it's what's best for the child.
yeah.
And a lot of
So
parents
do
don't
you
do that. And that hurts me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, regardless of how a parent wants to raise their child, like I'm firmly of the belief that, if you have religious beliefs and, you want to have there's so many we grew up on very biblical based curriculum, and that's fine if that's what you want to do, but there has to be
Some
guidelines.
accountability.
And I know that these groups that we kind of grew up in are opposing to child rights because they think that it's going to take their rights from them to choose what their children are exposed to. And that's just not the case. Like, you can do whatever you want as long as you're picking a curriculum, you're sending in your test, so people know that your child is actually being homeschooled. And,
That
I
you're
feel like,
open to welfare checks periodically, surprise
Yes.
ones. You
Yes,
know,
I think there should be homeschooled children. I think there should be welfare checks. If the child is being homeschooled, somebody needs to lay eyes on the child physically and see, okay, this child is okay.
Yeah.
mhm, yeah. Well, I'm really impressed by how you seem to view Sasser the third and the potential for him to redeem himself from this, because, this was done as a child and hopefully he has the desire to be different. But I really want to say I respect how you view that.
I am looking at it with the thought of what would Alex say to me about the whole situation. And I could keep hearing my kids say, Mom, some of us just need more love.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um,
wow.
and Julie and I are also really kind of I have a very conflicting feeling about the death penalty, but in this particular case for Patricia, I don't know if I am opposed to it, and I don't know how to feel about that.
It's just for me, it's when anything comes to children, I'm just so it impacts me so much more. And it's like um it feels like there couldn't be any justice other than something severe happening to that person, because whatever it takes for somebody to do something to someone so innocent and so young, it's just
Yeah.
I
You're gonna make me cry.
Ugh.
I can see the tears swelling up in your
I'm
eyes.
sorry. I'm really sorry.
No, I on the death penalty, I can't say that I'm for it in any case because I that's where my religion believes. It is not our we don't have the right to take a life of another under any circumstance.
You're
Under
right.
any
I agree.
circumstance.
Yeah.
Personally, I believe that Patricia and James, the oldest James, I believe them two should be locked up in a cell and the keys thrown away and leave them there to think about what they've done
Yeah.
until they die of a heart attack in the ripe
I
old age
agree.
of whatever God decides to let them be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I typically feel so strongly against the death penalty, but in this case, I felt nothing when I read it, and I was like, huh. I But I feel like when I get that way when I see something happen to children,
Yeah.
when I see something happening to um, women or animals, like basically people preying upon others in such a brutal way, I tend to have a harder time being as staunch as you are. And I deeply respect that. And it's good to get those reminders, that no matter how we feel personally, it's not about revenge, because that's not going to make you feel better. It
No.
really isn't. But I think
You've taken
there
the
is
high
some,
road. You're seeing this as an opportunity to become an activist for other children.
I
We
see
highly
solace
respect
in them
that.
having to live, like you said, with that decision every single day. And
I've
I think that,
learned I've learned the worst torture you can give a human being is solitude. Making them
yes.
live in their own mind every day for the rest of their life. Your own mind can be a living hell.
I
And
know
that's what I
that
want
for
them
sure.
that's what I want them to have. I want them to be locked up in a cell and just left.
Mhm. Well, I know we've taken up a lot of your time, and we really like, I feel
Thank
very
you.
fortunate to have gotten your perspective on this. Like,
And I
I feel
respect
like
you
you're
so much for just not only the way you're carrying yourself, but the way that you speak about everything. You're handling it in such a healthy way. I can't even imagine trying to. I wouldn't be in the same headspace that you're in, and I
I
really
have a
respect your.
I have a 15-year-old autistic son that I have to show that even when life kicks you to the fullest extent of as hard as it can, you got to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and move on somehow. You have to find a way. And I have to get up and do this and live my life because I have to show him we can't just lay there in the bed and cry about it for the rest of our lives. We have to get up and we have to go forward. What would Alex want us to do? He would want us to get up and live our life to the fullest.
So, can I ask you, hopefully, something that brings some hope to people? But have you personally heard of the Coalition for Responsible Home Education?
No, I have not.
They're a group. We've recently interviewed their co-founder, and she was also homeschooled, and she had a great experience. But she is kind of trying to um, be a voice in for kids like James Alex, and like his case is on their site as well. But what they do is they're trying to enact legislation for like these common sense laws that we're talking about for children. And I started to become like a monthly donor because I think it's super important, but like I don't think people know that they exist. But what they're trying to do now is in every state try and have like 2 to 3 people, I think is the goal, that are previously homeschooled that want to get involved and be activists and talk to the legislature and our legislators about what this issue is and why it's so important, and put a face to the name, because like the Homeschool Legal Defense Association is such a big, powerful group that shuts down these lobbies to such a like it's startling. It's really startling that
And this stuff doesn't happen. The change for these kind of common sense laws, and then nothing gets put into place unless you make some noise. And that's what we need to start doing, is coming together collectively and strategically to make some noise and be like, hey guys, make people face the truth. Because this is another thing that we've discussed before, is these kind of cases don't get talked about enough. Like, you have to dig for these kind of things, and it's because people get uncomfortable, don't like being faced with stuff that's so emotional. But it's like we have to, because we owe kids.
we were all kids once, so it
We
does
owe
affect
them.
each and every one of us.
They're our future. The children are our future. And if we keep turning a blind eye, we're teaching them to turn a blind eye.
Absolutely.
Yes, I agree. So I feel like if you ever felt like reaching out to Rachel Coleman, who's there, I feel like much like Rayleigh's Law, Julie and I want to write a letter to their local representatives, trying to show our support. But that's putting people's voices and numbers behind things is how it gets done. And do you foresee trying to come about with some kind of uh, something that you could take to legislation to get passed, like in Alex's name? Is that kind of your goal with this, or?
Not in Alex's name per se, but in the name of all of the children that we have lost.
Yeah. And I mean, the
But yes,
statistic is
I
that
do.
like,
I mean, right now I have to try to stay low and keep quiet and to myself for the most part. But once that final trial's over and done with, oh yeah, I'm gonna be singing and dancing.
mhm. I mean, and it's the startling fact is that 4 to 7 kids every single day are dying in circumstances like Alex. So like really appreciate and respect you saying you want something for all kids, not just in his name. And I think, you know, we would like to do our part in helping in any way that we can, signing
Yes.
anything that we can, any petitions. And I mean, there are people out there who want to be a force for good. But, I feel like we have to get as loud and as strong as people like PETA, because they have billboards everywhere. Like we have to get people to be aware, first off,
Yeah.
that this is such a problem.
Not be scared to raise their voice about it. I think a lot of it is people know, but they're scared to let their voice be heard for some reason. And I just urge everybody to let your voices be heard. The more of us that are out there saying the same thing, the more likely we are to get heard.
I
Absolutely.
agree.
If you need help with anything,
Well, thank you.
sorry.
Go for it,
If you need
Julia.
help with
Sorry.
anything, like if you want to have a petition started and need help in any way, you want us to share a link to anything that maybe that you've started in an advocacy way or whatever, just reach out to us with anything, and we would love to be as active as we can.
Yes, I appreciate every bit of it. And I appreciate y'all doing this podcast for Alex to share his story.
Well, you know what is interesting, Alicia, is that we see there's tons, the best performing podcasts out there are ones that are about true crime. So people are interested in the genre, but you don't hear, I think Suffer the Little Children is the only one that I've heard that focuses specifically on children and what is happening with children in the United States. And I think that
I watched that one too. That one makes me cry a lot.
I think it's so important that those exist, because I think, people have this kind of weird fascination with true crime, but, this is something that isn't happening under the radar. And in the States, in the industrialized nation, we here in the States have the highest mortality rate for children. And that's shocking. We're the United States. That shouldn't be us. That's not what I want us to be known for. So I think it's important. And I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. You are inspirational in how you speak on it and how you express your feelings. So we're deeply grateful.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you. And we hope you have a good rest of your weekend. And thank you once again for the time that you took out of your day.
No problem. Anytime y'all want to talk.
Thank you. You will hear from us again, because I want to make sure that I don't forget about it. I don't want to just talk about something and forget about it. Like, I
No.
want to check back in. I want to know what
The whole purpose
happens.
of this is to be a catalyst for change, not to just talk about it, because people talk about a lot of stuff, but nothing gets done. And we're like, we're really tired of just talking. So we want to do something.
Yeah. So keep us posted. We will keep you in our thoughts and prayers.
Yes, very much.
All right. Bye, Alicia.
Bye, ladies.
Thank you. Bye.